All right, here we go. Today's video, how to prime a line pump. And this is a good one. We've got about 325 feet of hose out today. Let's take a walk down the hill here and we'll go through our setup and then we'll talk about how we're gonna prime this. But this is intended to be a basic instructional video as to the principles of priming a line pump. Basic principle is putting concrete through the rubber hose. The rubber is dry. As the first bit of concrete travels through that dry rubber, the dry rubber robs moisture and fines from the concrete, drying it out, which without proper primer will turn into a dry plug in the hose within about 10 to 25 feet. You won't make it far at all. So we use a primer to pre-lubricate ahead of the concrete. So we've got 2.5 inch hose right off the back of the pump. We have a very, very line pump friendly small aggregate mix here today. So it's suitable for this smaller line. Certain markets require 4-inch line, 5-inch line. We are very blessed and fortunate in our market to be able to use this smaller line. So we're coming all the way down the driveway. We've tied the hose off in a few spots here so that the surge effect from when we're actually pumping the concrete doesn't cause the hose to pull itself down the hill. The ropes will hold it in place. So we come down the hill, all the way down here, and we're pouring about 20 yards today for this tall retaining wall and a little step over on the other side. So we've run 2.5 inch hose all the way to the bottom of the hill here, tied off once again right there. So we've tied off 1, 2, 3, and then we'll tie off in a 4th spot near the back of the pump. Today's instructional video, how to prime the pump without plugging. So if we plug, we're gonna look really stupid, but we're not going to. Transitioning down to 2-inch hose for the last 50 feet here. The reason we've done that, to make it easier on the guys dragging the hose across the scaffolding, filling a wall. I'll show you what we're pouring here.
And I know that this one,
So you have that tall wall and this little piece of wall over here. That's it, not a lot, right? So there's 2 ways to do this. We could prime separately and first prime out just through the 2.5 inch hose, run our primer through, get the first bit of rocky material through, then connect up to the 2.5 to 2 inch reducer, throw a little bit of primer in there and go the rest of the way. Today we're going to connect everything up and try and go for the full run. The way that I see it is, if we do plug here and we have to break it apart, we would have this apart anyhow doing it the other way, so we might as well go for the full pull. There is a very good chance that it is going to plug at that reducer regardless of how much primer we use, and we'll have to break it apart. It takes about 2 minutes, shake a little bit out, reconnect, and away we go. So the strategy here is going to be 1 bucket of primer we'll put in this reducer here, then we'll connect it to the hose. We'll put another full bucket of primer in the hose at the very top of the hill, and then we're going to throw a full bucket of thicker primer into the elbow at the back of the pump. The reason for the thicker primer is because of the downhill run. We want that thick prime to cling to the walls of the hose and not slide ahead of the concrete. If it slides ahead of the concrete, there's potential that it only coats the bottom half of the hose, leaving the top half still dry. So we want that nice slug of primer to coat the entire diameter. So when the concrete comes through, we don't have dry hose on the upper, the upper half of the hose still dry, robbing fines from that material. So very, very important when priming downhill. You want a bucket of thick primer butting up against the concrete, and then a little bit of wetter primer ahead of it. There's other techniques as far as running plastic bags over the ends of the hoses to hold the primer back, etc., etc. Today we're going to keep it basic. We're going to keep it simple. We're just going to use a lot of primer, and we'll get it through. And like I said, there still is a very good chance we'll have a little plug at the reducer from 2.5 to 2 inch. If we ran all 2.5 inch hose here, I wouldn't be worried about a plug whatsoever, but decent chance it'll plug there. If it doesn't, consider that a bonus. So we'll climb back up to the pump here. We'll talk about what primer we have elected to use here today. Okay, here we go. So here is our primer in powdered form. High yield bentonite powder. Now this is about 1/8 of a bag of bentonite. You can buy a full sack of bentonite for about $12 Canadian. This bucket here is enough to prime out probably 2,000 feet of hose, so it's extremely cost effective. The drawback to bentonite, you cannot get it in the pour area. The first bit of concrete that it mixes with, it contaminates it, it will never harden. It will stay like mud. Even if it does semi-harden up, it will have no strength. So very critical with bentonite, do not allow it into the pore area ever, ever, ever. That's the one major drawback to it. So use with caution and care. Guys are probably gonna say, why don't you just order a yard of grout? For a job like this, we're an hour and a half from the ready mix plant. To get a yard and a half of grout here would cost close to probably $1,000. And it ties up a ready mix truck for X amount of time. The ready mix supplier doesn't care for that much in busy times like this. So bentonite for our application is far better. If we're doing a large commercial pour, large diameter hose, big volume, yes, we will use grout. But for the residential pours, bentonite is our go-to. We played around with cement powder as well. Cement powder does work. It's a lot more expensive than bentonite. In my opinion, the actual priming effectiveness, nothing beats bentonite. Aside from grout supplied in a ready mix truck, in my opinion, nothing is as effective as bentonite. Slick primers with our material because of the type of sand that's used in our material, and this is actually pretty indicative of the type of sand we have. It's quite coarse. It does not jive with slick prime at all. You're lucky to get 25 feet through a hose, so we're not using that either. So here we go with the bentonite. Fire our water up. We're gonna put a good amount. This is gonna be the thicker stuff, so put a good amount in here. And it is just powdered mud, but do your best not to breathe this stuff in. Something like that for the thinner stuff. A little bit more there. You don't necessarily need a drill to mix this stuff, but definitely makes the process a lot quicker. If you have access to warm water, it fattens up and get a lot better yield per raw amount of bentonite used if you can mix with warm water off the ready mix truck, or if you have a hot water tank heater on your pump. It definitely is it's a benefit. So we'll water this up. Like so. Same thing here, like so. It's always better to start off too thick than too thin. You can always add water, but you can't take it away. Kind of like slumping concrete. Here a little bit. The reason I put a thinner bucket in at the end of the hose, with the hose being dry, even though we did run some water through them, it'll dry out by the time concrete gets here. We want the thinner stuff to have a little bit more available moisture to pre-lubricate that rubber. It's not as critical for this stuff at the end of the run to be thick enough to hold the concrete back as it is with the stuff that's going to go right in the elbow of the pump. So you always want a little bit of wet stuff ahead of your thick stuff is ideal. And we have 325 feet of hose out here, so we're going to use a lot of bentonite. A good general rule is for every 150 feet, you'd use about one full 5-gallon pail. Because of the downhill run today, we're going to go a little bit extra. This red tote full is equivalent of about 2 5-gallon pails. And that 5-gallon pail is obviously a 5-gallon pail, so pretty self-explanatory. So this is looking about where I want to be for the stuff that's going to go on the elbow. I might even fatten that up a little bit more. I want it real thick in that back elbow, so give her a little more love here. Beautiful. That's what we're after. So the next step, I'm not going to spray any waters in the cylinders of the S2. I don't want to segregate that first bit of concrete, especially on a downhill prime like this. So 0 water in the S2 for cylinders. What I want to do, I want the cylinder, if you bring the camera in here in, we're going to do one stroke it forward here. Okay, I'm gonna do one more stroke, and as soon as it shifts over, we're gonna stop right there. The idea there is I want that cylinder all the way back, the piston cup all the way back in the cylinder, so we have that full cylinder empty and void. So we put the primer in the elbow in here, it can pour in through the elbow, through the S tube, and fill that entire cylinder. We have the whole thing loaded with primer. So that is the purpose for doing that. And I should mention, the priming speed here, I like a stroke every 5 to 7 seconds. So let's wait for it to shift over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a little bit quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Bang on. Every 5 to 7 seconds. If the line size is bigger, the hose size is bigger, you might want to go a little bit quicker. If you want it to a smaller hose, you want to go a little bit slower. Once we get this down the hill, flowing down the hill, I might slow it down so that when the concrete hits the 2-inch hose, we're at a stroke like every 10 seconds. I'm not a fan of priming fast, not with our materials, not with our sand. I have not enjoyed great success by doing so. That may differ in your market. There are other markets where guys swear by priming fast. Ours, from what I've seen in my 25 years doing this, there's no benefit to it whatsoever. If anything, it's a detriment. So we're gonna take this thick primer now. I'll grab a cone. You know what, for demonstrative purposes, I'm gonna pull this reducer off just so I can show you. You get a better visual here. Normally I just dump it straight into this 4 to 3 reducer. But for today, we'll go right in the elbow. Okay. So what I love about this little tote, you can fold it up. It's almost like it's its own funnel. Come in real close in. We're gonna fill this thing all the way up. So that first stroke is gonna be hopefully nothing, or ideally nothing but solid primer. Beautiful. Exactly what we want. So I'm going to throw my reducer back on now, like so. Clamp goes on like so, and as I always say in my YouTube short videos, don't be a dickhead, use safety pins. We value the lives of our mixer drivers. Cheap, easy insurance, often overlooked, but a vital component at the back end of the pump for safety reasons. We'll mix up a little bit more primer now. This is going to go in the hose. Like I said, we're going heavy on the primer today. No such thing as too much on a pour like this. A little more in here in this one. There we go. Of course, Ready mixes early. He can wait. Hey, doing a little tutorial there on how to prime the pump. Hopefully we don't plug it. So that's gonna be our stuff that goes in the hose here. This is our stuff that's gonna go in the 2.5 to 2 reducer at the bottom of the hill. Okay. So now we'll throw this primer in this hose here. As you can see, that stuff was a lot wetter. The way we have the hose laid out here is quite conducive to holding the prime back. It's going to puddle here until we start the pump. In a way, it's all going to go at once. So we'll get our back end button up here and back the truck on, and then we'll show you how we do this. So one key item here, when you flip the reducer down to hook up to the hose, do not go beyond horizontal with it or your primer will drain back out. So for me, it's really handy because I have these safety chains And I can hold it in place with a chain until we're ready to rock so it doesn't fall down. So we'll snip this together, we'll go down, throw our bucket of primer in the 2.5 to 2 reducer, and then we'll get the truck on here and away we go. Okay, here we are, 2.5 to 2 reducer. We'll throw some primer in. Oh, you want to get the camera? You can get my beautiful mug installing the primer. And this primer's a little bit wetter as well. Beautiful. Want to get a close up of this going in? Yeah. Oh yeah. Just like that. And what I've done here, always handy to have, I took a cone, cut the end off so it's a little bit more open, and it's the ultimate bentonite funnel. Open her up a bit. Okay, we'll button this up. Like so. Let's grab the end of the hose, we'll curl it back, and we'll skim on primer here. There's going to be a lot of primer. So Ian will bring that hose back. And I would say we just... Yeah, we'll skim it on the bank. We'll take a lot, okay? So you got your camera ready? Might as well fire it up now. Remember when we first start, to get it right at the end of the hose, get that beautiful echo coming down the hose. Okay, I'm gonna go up and load this thing up and rock and roll.
Yeah, ready when you are.
Okay, we'll head up and get after it. What's the buster plugs? What's the prayer?
Oh, I don't remember it.
Buster plugs go away.
Okay. Rain, go away.
No,
Remember it.
Buster plugs go away, come again another day.
Okay, say it.
Buster plugs go away, come again another day. Break. It's kind of tough to say when you got a camera in your mouth, but yeah, okay, here we go. If you're not familiar with who Buster Plugs is, look him up on YouTube. He's a very abrasive personality that likes to troll the comments of most of my videos. He's got a real attitude on him. So maybe go pay his page a little visit, drop a comment, maybe a not so nice one. It'll be greatly appreciated. There you are, we're slumped up. Before we start the prime here, let's just take a little note that we love our drivers and want to keep them safe. So we have safety chain from the back end of the reducer. We have safety pins and everything. We have a safety sling from the reducer to the first hose, and a nice heavy rubber blast mat and a tarp to keep things clean. Right? Right, the driver's giving a thumbs up. Let me just fire up my my agitator. There we go. Sometimes it can help to throw that agitator in reverse for the first bit of material. I'm not too worried about it today. Beautiful. All right, we like the slump. Are we ready for pump on? I think we're ready for pump on. Here we go, wish me luck. Rock and roll. Rev this thing up a bit. All right. When I follow this down, you can hear it coming. We get past that reducer, we're golden. Can feel it coming, okay?
That's the biggest. Woo! I don't think guys will be happy.
We're still empty here. Here it comes, I can hear it now. There it is. We'll slow it down now. You can hear how rocky that is, so slow it right down. When we get through the taper, the primer is through. What about the concrete behind it? Now we got to get out of this primer here. We're not in the clear yet. And I think it may have just plugged.
You got a plug?
I think we did, yep. Yes, we did. Let's see where she plugged.
And then people show up. And even you guys.
Oh, in the hose. Later, bring her back to me and I'll just shake it. Yeah. Let's see what comes out of there. Shake a little more. Here. Yeah.
Daddy, does it make a difference?
Get that. No. A little more. Yeah. We'll break it here. It's plugged here. That's okay. It's kind of what we expected. It's okay. All right. Good enough? Yeah, okay. And this is, we're good here, okay. We'll do a quick underneath. Yeah. Okay.
Behind you, yeah.
Okay. Here we go. You're good. Yeah. We're good. Okay, we're through. Which is about exactly what we predicted. We got the bentonite through, a little bit of segregation at the taper. That was about a 70% chance of plugging. So like I said, we just snipped the hose off, shook a little bit of the rocky stuff through, and away we go. Even if we had primed this then connected up to that, we would have still had stuff on the ground, reconnect everything up. In my opinion, it was worth a try. For newer operators, I would say do the safer play. Just prime through the bigger hose first, get that taken care of, then connect up to the smaller reducer. But we've been doing this a little while now, so we're fully comfortable rolling the dice and taking the small risk for the big reward, right? So anyhow, we'll get pumping on these walls here. And we'll take a look at this stuff on the ground. That's the primer that came out. We'll check in on this about 4 hours from now, and you'll see it'll still be slop. Primer, 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 concrete. So we'll compare the concrete to contaminated concrete in about 4 hours, and you'll see what I mean by how critical it is not to pour bentonite in the pour area. Just like that, job is done, job is poured in. And as we mentioned at the start of the video, so this was the straight concrete. You can see that's taken a bit of a set. This was contaminated with bentonite. And that is mud and will forever remain mud. And that's the very first bit that was just bentonite and rock. So there you go. The premise of the video was not to show the perfect way that primes out 100% every time, because there is no such thing, but to show real world, and this is quite real world, with the 2.5 to 2 reducer at the end. As I said at the start of the video, extremely high chance of plugging, and it did. So we dealt with it accordingly, as we would on a regular prime. And we did not run all 2.5-inch hose. Reason being, we wanted the 2-inch on the end, as I said, to make life easier for the placers here. So real world scenario, using bentonite to prime. Extremely cheap, extremely effective material. Our primer of preference for sure. If you can't find bentonite in your area, and usually it can be sourced from a drilling supply outfit, try Concrete Pump Supply. They sell a product called PrimaPack, which is essentially individually sized packages of or individual usage size packages of bentonite, so you can get it from them. So Concrete Pump Supply. Anyhow, hope that helps somebody out there, especially new pumpers into the game. Bentonite for the win. Till next time, keep on pumping. Oh yeah, and I know there's gonna be a handful of people that are gonna say, why didn't you put a ball ahead of the primer to hold it back? The reason why, once again, our sand. Tried it many times. They'll plug within a half a hose. Some of the sand, like the stuff I'd seen in my brief stint down in Texas, it's some really powdery beach sand. Definitely concrete behaves differently. But with this particular sand of ours, there's a lot of things up here that don't work that seemingly do work in other areas. So no, we do not use a ball ahead of the primer. We don't use a wad of paper. Tried them all, never had luck with it. So there you go.